All right, everybody, welcome into Around the Felt. I'm your host, Reagan Loescher, here with my co-host, Colin Tong. We're going to be breaking down the Chicago Bears 2024 season. We're going to be giving them letter grades each, and then we're going to be getting into what they can do to improve in 2025. I know, obviously, the free agency period has already happened. They've made a couple different trades, so they've already started to improve from last year. But, hey, the NFL draft is still approaching, so we'll get into that a little bit and where we think they should go. But Colin, how are we doing tonight, and what do you give the Bears after I hear how you're doing?
I'm doing great, man. It should be a fun team to talk about. You know, the Bears, a 5-12 season, started off a little better, and then, after that Commanders Hail Mary, they kind of fell off a cliff. And some positives, but a lot of negatives here. And I gave the Bears a D- for their season. I might seem a little harsh, but we got to be mean. The reality of the situation is you took Caleb Williams number 1. Jaden Daniels went number 2 and looks like an absolute superstar. Now, can Caleb still be a superstar? Absolutely. But early returns say you picked the wrong quarterback. He was sacked the most in the league because you didn't have a great offensive line in front of him. But also, he's got a problem of improvising too much and holding on to the ball. And he's taken way too many sacks. He's got to speed up his processing. I think Ben Johnson will certainly help him with that. But I think we all knew going into last season with Eberflus another year was a mistake because now you have this thing where you have a rookie quarterback with a coach, and after 1 year, he's gone, and now he's got to learn a new system. And that's never a recipe for success. Can Caleb overcome it? Sure, but it's still not ideal. And Eberflus,
no, it never
I don't
is.
think we thought he wasn't going to be your guy. I mean, at least the defense was very good in 2023. We're like, you know what? You have confidence in Eberflus and that defense.
Eberflus, he kind of was an Eberflus. I don't know. You weren't trying to make a joke there, but he kind of was an Eberflus to this team. He definitely
kind of was, yeah. But the defense took a step back. They were 27th in total defense in terms of yardage, 28th in rush. That's not good. They were the 13th scoring defense, though, so a lot of bend, don't break here. I guess that's a positive, right? I do like some pieces they have on defense, but, you won 5 games. Vibes weren't high. You brought in Keenan Allen to have that trio with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. Keenan started off slow, heated up at the end of the year, but it was too little too late. Odunze really didn't do much as a rookie. I'm still very bullish on his future, and I think Keenan Allen being out of the picture is great. I think it was a little bit of Shane Waldron syndrome. I think he's gone. That's good. And I think with Rome Odunze going into this year as your wide receiver 2 with Ben Johnson, with an improved offensive line, I'm very optimistic about him going in this year. But the reality of the situation is you won 5 games. You were a team that was hoping to take a step forward with your new quarterback. You moved on from Justin Fields. Caleb had some moments, but too many sacks, too many turnovers. You didn't win enough games. Step back on defense. Eberflus gone. It's a bad season, man. It's a D-.
Yeah, I'll give him a D+. I mean, it's tough because the reason I'm giving him a little bit of a break here because they did move on from Eberflus midseason, and at that point, it's like, what can you really expect? I mean, especially with that bad of a team. I mean, the one positive I'll take away is you finally got the win over the Green Bay Packers. I mean, it was so close to the first one, and you finally ended that streak. So that's definitely a positive to take away. I mean, Caleb, you're not setting him up, especially with Ryan Poles as a GM still there. If they move on from him after this season, you'd imagine Caleb will still be there. So then you're pairing Caleb. It means if you move on from Poles, it probably was another bad season. So then you have a coach that's on a different timeline, a new GM on a different timeline, and a quarterback on a different timeline. So they're doing all the wrong steps. But at the end of the day, if Caleb Williams is as generational as he's supposed to be, you would imagine Ben Johnson can fix him and continue to help him grow. The biggest thing from watching him was he just never looked comfortable, especially in the first half. He was one of the worst. He might be the worst first half quarterback, but he definitely turned it up in the second half a lot. I remember I streamed him in fantasy football a couple times. Thanksgiving one comes to memory, but it was back-to-back weeks. That one and the week after where he had less than 100 passing yards, no touchdowns, anything. And I'm like, damn it, why'd I play him? And then the second half, he just lit it up, 200 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. I'm like, damn. So he was a second half beast. but he definitely was a slow starter for sure. Never looked comfortable, held onto the ball a lot. I always saw him running backwards, trying to do shit that worked in college, but it was like, dude, just get rid of it. I mean, and at a certain point, it was like, you got the season's over. Start forcing the ball. Give your wide receivers a chance. I mean, you have such a sick core. When you have Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore, plus Cole Kmet's no slouch either. It's like, look, you got a lot of weapons around here. You got to give these guys chances versus just holding on to the ball and taking the sack. So he didn't do his line any favors. And the defense obviously faltered. I'd say this season was really lost in that Commanders Hail Mary game because I believe they had a winning record at that point. And that was when I feel like the season completely got turned upside down. And the Tyreek Stevens, and you see him chirping the fans in Washington, and then he like runs back last minute. So I would say that is where the season fully collapsed. And I thought, for the situation Caleb was in, I would have thought he would have had a better season because you could argue he came into one of the best situations the first overall quarterback's ever been put into.
I think he did. Absolutely. That was the best situation.
And he really, looking at it at the end of the season, you'd say, he was one of the worst quarterbacks. I mean, you'd probably say he's 3, but I definitely think you can make a case between him and Drake May for 3. I don't know if you could say for certain he was even better than Drake May. I mean, I would say for certain Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels were better. I'm leaning Caleb was better than Drake May, but I don't think you could say that for certain. I mean, Caleb just played more and stayed healthier, but there were a lot of times where you were looking, you're like, this is not the guy we thought. But then there were a lot of moments where you were like, all right, we could see why this guy's the best quarterback. I mean, there were times where I was like, all right, he's doing stuff where it's like, he's better than Jaden Daniels, even in my opinion. And then there were other times where it's like, this guy looks like he doesn't even belong on a football field. So it was just very inconsistent and up and down. So you just hope he shows a lot more flashes like we saw sporadically this season. And they've already, and I'm ready to get into the offseason if you are, but they've obviously already completely bolstered that offensive line. So that will be a big factor in, improving him.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll get in the offseason. I did want to say with Caleb, like you look at his stats, like on paper, like 6 interceptions, that's a positive. Certainly. 20 touchdowns, like it looks good. 3,500 yards, solid. The Bears still can't get a 4,000-yard passer. Maybe Caleb gets it next season. I think he will be close to 4,000 yards. But, when you're going with the argument between him and Drake May, it's like, yeah, Caleb might have had better stats, but it's also like, he had DJ Moore, which Moore started off slow, but then I think Caleb started to get his rhythm with DJ Moore in the second half of the season, and DJ Moore was that guy that we saw 2 years ago with Justin Fields. And Keenan Allen started to heat up the second half of the season. Like, yeah, I mean, but Drake May didn't have that. You know what I mean? Drake May didn't have the number 9 overall pick as his wide receiver 3. He had nothing. Yeah. Both offensive lines weren't good, but on paper, New England's was worse. It's just Caleb was holding the ball so much, so he got sacked more, right? Then he played more games. So, but going into the offseason, Reagan, to your point, yeah, they clearly were like, okay, if Caleb Williams doesn't play well in 2025, we're going to lose our job. Talking about Ryan Poles in the front office, right? So immediately Ben Johnson comes in. You sign center Drew Dahlman, 3 years, $42 million from Atlanta. You trade for Joe Thuney from the Chiefs. Love that move. Everyone's like, damn, all it cost you was a 5th-round pick. Like, why so many teams and fan bases like, why didn't we do that? Joe Thuney's a dog. Like, it seems like a no-brainer, and it's also, he's a leader. He's been around the league for many years. He's won multiple Super Bowls. Like, that's the kind of guy you want to add to this team in front of a young quarterback that you need. Basically, you need him to be successful and live up to that draft status for you to keep your job in Ryan Poles as general manager. And then you also traded for Jonah Jackson, another guard. So you just redid your entire interior offensive line. You still got Darnell Wright, who you took in the first round a couple years ago at right tackle. And like, you know what? I kind of like what they got going on offense now. And defensively, you had Dio. I'm going to butcher this last name. Adeyingbo. I know Peter Schrager's very high on him, Dio, and he's a solid player. And then Grady Jarrett, another veteran guy. Yeah, he's not the same player he was. He's not going to get a Pro Bowl for you. But you know what? He's a veteran. He's been there. And defensively, you weren't very good. You were 27th in total defense, 28th in rush defense. So the more help you can get in the trenches, the better. So I really like what they've done so far in this offseason. And I think there's a lot of ways they can go at number 10 overall. I'd be curious your thoughts on what they should do at number 10.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, like, if I'm looking at offense, the only one I'd consider there is Genty.
It'd be a home run for Genty, bro. That'd be perfect landing
I also
spot.
don't mind Swift. Like, you paid him last year. I think a lot of the reasons for his, step back, you could say, from Philly is A, the offensive line wasn't as good, but B, the offense as a whole was bad. So they could never get the pass game going. So it's hard to get the running game going if you can't establish the pass. So I'm not totally sold like out on Swift. So I'm okay with that. I mean, I think they'd probably be better service going defense, and they'll have obviously a bunch of different opportunities. But also, I wouldn't hate it if they traded back either to recuperate or to recruit some of those draft picks that they gave up trading for the offensive line as well. So I think that's definitely an option as well, especially if Jackson Dart does shoot up a lot of boards and some teams get desperate and they're like, hey, like Chicago, we'll trade up to 10 with you and take Dart here. Like we're willing to do that. And hey, maybe you pick up another day 2 pick and only move back a couple spots to do so. So I think that's an option that a lot of people haven't talked about. I mean, at the cornerback position, I mean, if I wouldn't hate Will Johnson there. I mean, if we're looking at edge, you're pretty much going to have your pick of all the edge rushers. I think the only one that would be gone at that point is Carter. So Mike Green's a guy that's interesting to me. I think there's a chance he's the second edge rusher taken off the board. I just love what he's showing, his athletic, his tape. I mean, he dominated at Marshall, so he's a guy that's interesting for sure.
Jaylon Walker from Georgia.
Yes, that's another one I was going to say.
I'm seeing him mocked
well.
to Carolina a ton, but Jaylon Walker I think can make sense. I don't know. I still think offense is very much in play here, even if it's not Ashton Genty. Like they were the last ranked total offense last year, 31st pass, 26th rush, 28th scoring. That's garbage. Ben Johnson, big boost for that offense. The offensive line that they've added, the interior, the 3 guys, big boost. Look, I think Ashton Genty, if he's there at 10, I think you take him. Ben Johnson, a lot of success after taking Jahmyr Gibbs at 12. Right. I just don't think he'll be there. I think we're both in the same boat. I think Genty's going 6 to the Raiders, to be honest with you. I don't think he's going to be here at 10. I think it'd be a home run. Could they go offensive line again? Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Could you go Will Campbell to be your left tackle? And he also has interior flexibility. And it's like, you know what? Now you got some depth and competition along that offensive line. I think that's certainly in play. I think going Will Johnson, absolutely in play. I think that would be great opposite of Jaylon Johnson. Could you go with an edge rusher? For sure. Opposite Montez Sweat, a Jalen Walker, a Michael Williams. Like they could go a lot of ways here. Mike Green, yeah, like they can go a lot of ways here, but it's not like they have desperate needs, right? I think they can fill some holes in a lot of different routes. And they're going to get a stud player at either edge rusher, at corner, at running back, or along the offensive line. I think they're in a good spot picking number 10.
And I know they paid Cole Kmet, but I would say Tyler Warren would be another.
Tyler Warren, I was going to say that. Yeah, dude.
Like
100%.
not that I'm out on Cole Kmet, but you could always pair them together. I mean, Tyler Warren's pretty dynamic, so you always could have a nice 1-2 punch. I mean, we've seen a lot of teams who run 2 tight ends have big success. I mean, you look at the Patriots back in the day, but I mean, in recent memory, you look at the Ravens, like what they're doing with Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews right now. They're really using a lot of packages with 2 tight ends. I mean, Kansas City obviously went out and paid Noah Gray, so they use Gray and Kelsey a lot. So there's plenty of teams that use 2 tight ends at different times. I mean, even Detroit ran a lot of 2 tight end sets over there. Like they had a bunch of different guys that would mix in with Laporta, like between Brock Wright and stuff. And they gave those guys money. So I wouldn't hate that at all. I mean, especially because he's just so raw and like so dynamic what he could be. And, we saw what Bowers was last year. So, do a lot of teams want to pass on him? It'll be interesting because, they did have their shot at Brock Bowers last year. They opted to go with Dunze, which is fine. But you saw what Bowers did in year 1 and you saw what Rome did in year 1.
100%. And I think Tyler Warren just adds a different dynamic from Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet's a solid player. He's going to be in this league for a long time. But just in terms of having the ball in your hands, Tyler Warren's just on a different level than Kmet. It's not even close. So I think having a guy like, Cole Kmet's more that possession dude. Like he can work the sticks for you in the middle of the field. But a player like Warren, what he can do, I just adds a different element to that offense. And you're already very comfortable with what you have out wide in DJ Moore and Odunze. Like you could add a third guy, but that's not at 10. You have some other needs that I think should be addressed. But I don't hate Tyler Warren to the Bears at all.
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting. I mean, Chicago's in a good spot. The only downside is you are in the hardest division in football, where even with all these moves and as sexy as this team sounds on paper, they're still probably the 4th ranked team. I
just had this argument with my boys because they were like, damn, like after they added all these dudes in the trenches, they're like, damn, like Chicago's going to be good next year. I think they're going to make the playoffs. And I go, genuine question. I'm not like trying to argue, but who are they better than in their division? Can you definitively say they're better than Green Bay? Are they better than Minnesota?
Well, I also think, we all overreacted last offseason where they made all these moves and obviously it kind of blew up. So I mean, they can do all the right things, but then again, like when you're a bad franchise and you've been a bad franchise for a very long time, it's hard to just all of a sudden just take that tag off and think all these sexy offseason moves are just going to click and they're just going to automatically be good. I mean, they're in the similar tier to me as, the Jets, the Browns, the Lions. It's just the difference is they had hardware, but that goes back to the 80s. So it's like, it's not recent hardware. In since 2000, they've been one of the worst franchises. So yeah, it's sexy on paper, but it's still the Chicago Bears, so until we see it, I don't know if we can just push them up to 4 in the same way I was talking about with Green Bay, like earlier, like in a previous pod, like until we see it, I don't know if we could put them ahead of the Vikings or Lions. So to me right now, I view it the same way as it shook out last year until we see them take that next step. They're at the bottom of the division, but they definitely have the right tools and they're going in the right direction to do so. But Dave, let's hear some questions from you. I'm sorry, Drock.
Yeah,
here's Drock.
Watch your tongue.
What's your tone? All right, guys. Pretty standard question I ask you guys every time. But should the Bears commit to Caleb Williams as a franchise quarterback, or is he being overhyped?
I mean, is there an element of him being overhyped coming into the league with what we saw? I mean, I guess, but the talent is still there. It's undeniable. It's just he has to develop as a passer and be more on schedule and work through his progressions and stop trying to be Superman. You don't need to be Superman. It's okay to hit your check down. Like Mahomes hits his check down all the time. Like Josh Allen hits his check down all the time. It's part of being a quarterback and understanding what you have in front of you. You don't have to hit a home run on every play, right? So I think with Ben Johnson being in the building, he's very excited about what Caleb can do outside the pocket, off schedule, and that's going to be an element that will still be utilized in his game. But he needs to work inside the pocket more, and I think Caleb will now, will he be the best quarterback in this class? I mean, there's a lot of competition right now, and you're feeling like Jaden Daniels is that guy, but no, Caleb Williams is their dude for at least another 2-3 years, and then they could move off if he actually doesn't develop as a passer and continues to take these sacks.
I mean, and this might be me being a hater, but if Chicago has another 5-win season and he shows no signs of improvement, they're 100% bringing in competition in year 3. I don't think we've seen plenty of teams take a guy in the top 5 picks where it doesn't, they show no development. And by year 3, there's competition in there. So I expect him to take step forwards, but with everything they're giving him, if he still doesn't show any improvements or barely any improvements, Chicago's still kind of very similar with all these moves they've made. I think they definitely bring someone else in next year. How could you not? I mean, they're giving him everything necessary to succeed in this league. You don't see many organizations put this much talent around players with that pedigree that early. It usually takes a couple of years, and it's like the only reason they're able to do that is because that guy wills himself with not a lot of talent like Jaden Daniels did and CJ Stroud did and some of these other guys and even Bryce Young last year, he started out rough, but at least by the back end of it, he showed some splashes. So
yeah,
Caleb's at least got to do that where he shows enough that it's like, all right, we know he's the guy. Where if he is like a first half, if his whole full year is similar to Bryce Young's first half of last year, like they totally move on. Because the Panthers were halfway through the season last year. People were like, they're totally moving on. Like, do you trade Bryce Young? Who do they draft? I mean, are they drafting Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders? Like that was the talk in the first half of the season after he got benched. This is like, is Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders the starting quarterback of the Carolina Panthers next year? And he sat on the bench for a little bit and totally improved. So I still could see that happening as well. If he starts out slow, like let him sit on the bench and see if that approach the Panthers took works out. So I would like to see them bring in a veteran to at least be there and mentor him. Tyson Badgett should not be the quote unquote veteran backup quarterback. So Joe Flacco, a name I talked about for the Vikings, is also an interesting name to me here too, because it's not like competition, but it's a veteran leader.
Yeah, I could see that being a fit. And I think certainly in my mind, if Caleb doesn't progress this season like we're expecting, I don't think they're going to draft a guy early, but I think, a veteran could come in like similar to Daniel Jones going to Indianapolis to compete with Anthony Richardson. Like we could see something like that where it's a guy that can push him a little more. But let's be honest here. If at number 10 overall, they go Ashton Genty or they go a Will Campbell and they add another piece to that offense, you look around and you go, I mean, what more do you want, right? And if he can't throw for 4,000 yards like no Bears quarterback could do with what he has around him, with the pedigree coming into the league, then we might have a problem.
I completely agree, dude. And that's what I'm trying to say. Like, he needs to show at least some improvements because they're giving him everything possible. You don't see, and Bears fans, you should be excited because a lot of teams like this, you don't see them commit and do all the right things on paper. Like on paper, they're doing all the right moves. I mean, you got the sexiest hire out there in Ben Johnson, and Poles has continued to bring in talent, and you see he's doing all the right things with the offensive line. So it's definitely, they're setting up Caleb Williams for success. He's just got to take that next step next year.
100%. I agree. Any more questions from Drock, or is that all we got for this Bears pod here?
That's all we got. All we got, boys.
That's all we got. We had to shit on the Bears a little bit. A 5-win season, a D- from me, a D+ from you. I think that's pretty warranted, though, given what we saw. Bears fans, hit our comments. What did you think about Caleb Williams? Are you still confident he's a guy that can lead you to the playoffs and potentially a Super Bowl? What's your outlook now that you have this improved offensive line play in front of Caleb going to 2025? It's a very difficult division, arguably the most difficult in football. I'm thinking Bears are probably around an 8-win team, 9-win team next year in a very competitive division, but it's going to come down to division games. Like, can they beat Green Bay again, right? Can they beat a Detroit? Can they be more competitive? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm very interested, but future is bright. I'd be excited if I'm a Bears fan. I would be very, very excited.